go. However we do it.
Google Fi, a phone plan by Google.
So, well, that got ruined. Anyway, I love commercials, don't you? Just a reminder, Google Fi, because YouTube in Google, right? We are doing a very special presentation. StarFox omodetou gozaimasu. Nippon wa Japan is 1 day ahead. So if it is the 25th now, it is the 26th in Japan. So the 27th is StarFox anniversary. Pardon the other live. I'm going to try to delete that previous live. That lasted less than a minute because I couldn't get things right. So a couple of things here. I'm doing a presentation. I want my presentation to be right. So here we have, this is a tweet. I don't know if you can be able to see this tweet, but I'll read it for you. StarFox 30 30日でくれてありがとう。そして君の something or other ゲームすべての人ありがとう。Thank you for supporting me for over 30 years, Fox, and everyone involved in the games that you've appeared in. Thank you. This is from Takaya Imamura's Twitter, and this is the art that he has here. 30 years. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of years. Getsu, or no, actually it's Ichigetsu Nigetsu, I think. So this is the art, the stamp. There's the Fox stamp on it. And here's somebody, I guess, in the video game industry or anime industry. He says, Takamura-san, StarFox 30th anniversary, arigato gozaimasu. And I think it's the toys. So here are the toys. These are the StarFox toys. There's the what is it? The supplies. There's the bomb. There's StarFox R-Wing. I think he says here, arigato, thank you so much. We have to do a shooter sometime. That's translated from Japanese. Here is Board Gameu. This is what I wrote. Okay, so this is my Sonny's Bonds. This is my Twitter. StarFox times Space Invaders. So there's the Space Invaders board game, and there's StarFox R-Wing from the Starlink Battle for Atlas. That sort of that plastic game, like what is it? Skylanders, right? Like Spyro and Crash Bandicoot, and they were all part of that. And he says, oh, and the guy, not Imamura-san, but the guy says nice. So it's the guy that Imamura wants to work with. So there's Peppy, there's Slippy, and there's the R-Wing. So that was all right. I liked this. This was very good. This is close to Imamura, because Imamura is a busy man. I'm sure he doesn't want all kinds of people bothering him. But as far as his life right now, he's retired. So 2 years ago, in January, Takaya Imamura, he artist and designer, he revealed on Facebook that he was leaving Nintendo after 32 years. And that's him, that's the last picture on his last day. He stated that he will be sad as he thinks about how he will no longer be coming here anymore. Imamura had joined Nintendo in '89, began as a graphic designer on the original F-Zero and StarFox games and Super Nintendo. So he's an anime, artist. He's freelancer now, but he designed the characters Captain Falcon from F-Zero, Fox McCloud, Tingle from the Legend of Zelda series, and also directed the Steel Diver and Tank Troopers games. I have those games. Make sure to get Tank Troopers and Steel Diver, the sequel, Sub Wars, because that's on the 3DS eShop. So you don't want to not get that. You want to make sure you get that. So what we're going to be looking at, because I'm not sure how long this will take, and I know that this is a long interview, but I thought it was really worth it, because in case you were guessing, because I said I gave you a clue, it's about barrels, but it's not Donkey Kong. It is the 30th anniversary of StarFox. So we're going to get to the interview. If we can, one moment, please, because I'm on a live stream. Of course, I would delete that. God damn. One moment. We are going to find it, and we are going to get to it. Jesus butt fucking Christ. Of all the things to do wrong. I wanted to get the interview right now, and I deleted the wrong butt fucking thing. Of course I did. Why would I do anything that's of actual value here? Oh, we better not have lost it. Did we lose it? I'm gonna scream my head off. Where is it? Let's go. We're all dying of old age here. Let's go. Okay. So I'm gonna read this out to you because this is like the greatest this is the greatest StarFox interview that I had the pleasure of reading. And so this was during the time that StarFox Adventures just came out. And they were working on the next one, which was going to be with Sega with the Assault. And the DS was not too far away, Command, and the future of StarFox. So it was very vague, but it was not too far away from what they were doing here. So I'm going to read the developer interview. We're going to go from here. I'm just going to keep going from this point. This lengthy interview from Nintendo Dream with longtime StarFox series steward and character designer Takaya Imamura covers his early works at Nintendo. The conception of the StarFox series, the backstories behind many of its characters, and his recent forays into external collaboration with a particular focus on his work merging the world of StarFox with Rare's unrelated action-adventure game Dinosaur Planet. You remember Dinosaur Planet was... And there's actually the... what we see now is a dumped ROM of an incomplete game compared to what we got on the GameCube. So let's go ahead and we're going to do the Q&A here. This is from 2003 or 2002. What's been the response to StarFox? This is the interviewer talking. The interviewer says, what's been the response to StarFox Adventures since its release? Imamura says, once a game is released, I always make a point of listening to and reading the reactions of players, including those shared online. But it's always an emotionally turbulent experience. I either end up feeling really happy or really depressed. Laughs about it. The interviewer says, it's the same for us guys making game magazines. The internet has been, Imamura says, the internet has grown more and more popular since the release of StarFox 64. And I've been keeping close tabs on it. But the reaction's pretty much in line with my expectations. In the beginning, some people who went in comparing this game to Zelda were a little disappointed. But once they reach the latter half of the game, where the tempo picks up and it really starts to feel different, their feelings become more positive. In that regard, it seems like the general consensus on the game is improving over time. And as we move further from the release and more people clear the game, I strove to make this game feel unique. And I think that's starting to come across. Gotcha. For today, we'd like to talk about not just adventures, but about the StarFox series as a whole. Shigehisa Nakaue from the editorial department is also with us today. First off, how did you initially come to be involved with StarFox, Imamura-san? And he says, next year, which was 2003, will mark exactly 10 years since the release of the original StarFox for Super Famicom. I joined Nintendo in 1989, and that came out during my 4th year at the company. How did you come to make StarFox? So here's a picture. That's him next to Crystal. He loves Crystal. I love Crystal as well. Anyway, at the time, the majority of 3D shooting and racing games were achieved via 2D fakery. Polygon technology was beginning to emerge, and Miyamoto really wanted to use polygons to create an authentic 3D shooting game with genuine depth. From there, talk began of the Super FX chip, and that's when the prototyping started. Actually, I worked on F-Zero immediately after joining the company, and after that I worked on The Legend of Zelda. You worked on A Link to the Past? I made over half of the game's bosses, I want to say. Wow, that's great. Oh, like the one with all the eyeballs. Right. That was my favorite. I put a lot of work designing something around that translucency effect, so I felt really happy with myself once I realized, whoa, this is actually pretty cool. I still remember that vividly. So you were handed something important from the very beginning of your career. That's right. I was very fortunate to get my start with F-Zero for that game. I worked on the course design, pixel art for the vehicles, and designed the logo. And when the game was wrapping up, I started working on character designs. I've been drawing a lot of pictures, doodles basically, and presented them like, how about something like this? And after a lot of back and forth, they sort of just ended up being adopted as the main character, as the characters. For the comic that was printed in the manual, I told them I wanted to do something in the style of an American comic. And I drew all the original panels and had them finished up by an overseas studio. I'm going to interject here. I do recall the one, they used to make comic books on Nintendo Power. And I do remember the Super Mario Brothers manga and the Zelda manga. And the Mario one was tied into Super Mario World. The Zelda one was tied to Link to the Past. And then there was one StarFox comic that was inserted. And I don't know if I can find it now, but there was a little paper, sort of an origami, or you make your own StarFox R-Wing. I don't know if maybe I should put it, because my magazine's kind of banged up, so I might as well just put it together. Anyway, Imamura continues. Coming off the back of that project, I was planning on drawing more cool characters. So he's talking about Zelda. More cool characters in F-Zero vein for StarFox. But then Miyamoto blindsided me with, how about animal characters? And I was like, come again? Ah ha 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 ha. I don't know. My thinking is maybe Shigeru Miyamoto was thinking of the Peach Boy, Momotaro. But here Imamura says, I was really thinking to myself, are we actually going to use animal characters in a shooting game? But the idea certainly was attention grabbing, so I put it to the 3 members of Argonaut who were working with us at the time. Now, Argonaut made Vortex. I'll be playing some of that and showing you that as part of the StarFox tribute. So that was the company that developed the Super FX chip, right? Imamura says, right. They're British, so I asked, how do people feel about animal characters overseas? And they told me they wouldn't be off-putting. So I figured I'd take a shot at designing an animal character, and someone commented, well, the Fushimi Inari Taisha shrine is right by the office, so maybe a fox would be good. Who said that? Miyamoto. At that point, he said, a fox, a penguin, maybe try a rabbit too. So Miyamoto's coming up with, it's like George Lucas coming up with, how about try this, faster and more intense. Anyway, Imamura says, now by penguin, he was saying stuff like, you know those ones with the whiskers that grow above their beak? How about it? I think those are emperor penguins. And as I'm sitting there listening with, sure, images of animals from Japanese folklore started to emerge in my mind. Momotaro. So I ended up trying my hand at a fox, a rabbit, and a pheasant. So yeah, Falco's a pheasant. I used to think he was a falcon. For some reason, people seem to think he's a falcon. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here so you can... Okay. So you can see a little bit better. Okay. People seem to think he's a falcon, but no. He's actually a pheasant. And from there, Imamura says, I asked myself, what should I do for one more character? And I was like, oh yeah, how about a toad? And my thinking was that it'd be more interesting to swerve hard in a different direction with the final character. So I dared to add a toad. We made that decision more or less on the spot. I still have the first sketch I drew for StarFox, and the design is pretty much on the same as the final. Wow, I need to see that. Let me bring it out for you. In an interview given at the time, Miyamoto said that the Inari Elementary School had a baseball team named after the Inari Foxes. Let me see if I can hit that little... This is a footnote. The English word fox is not the Japanese equivalent kitsune. Okay. So that's interesting. Imamura continues. I remember hearing that at the time as well. After all, Fushimi Inari is famous for foxes, and they are the gods of prosperity. They'd be a good omen to ensure high-selling software. Nakaue says, that's kind of cool, though. Fushimi Inari Taisha being in a shooting game. Imamura continues, at the time, we half-jokingly said to each other, let's make a tori out of polygons, a bird. I remember we did actually make one and added it to the Super Famicom game, but it felt out of place, so we ended up taking it out. Now, if you recall in the original StarFox game, besides there's a bird that gives you health, there's a weird bird that takes you to that paper airplane slot machine secret level. So the interviewer goes on, was it easy deciding on StarFox as the title of the game? Imamura continues, initially we suggested names like Starglider and StarCraft. We were the first ones to come up with StarCraft. Oh, well, we were working around the premise of Star something being the title. Were you influenced by Star Wars? Yeah, that's right. And since the main character is a fox, it seemed like Star Fox would work. I think it's a great title. It's simple and it's cool. Now, what we are seeing here is concept art. And these are the different, like you would see in an art book for Zelda. There's Slippy. There's hands for, I think this is Peppy's hands. Or it could be Fox's hands. There's the pheasant, Falco. Early Star Fox character sketches complete with a tori down by Fox's feet. Okay. Oh, tori meaning a temple or an archway. At this point, Fox's teammates were tentatively and magically named Rabby, Falcon, and Toad. Okay, Rabby. I see. After Ganondorf came Andorf. Okay. Did you also come up with the backstories for all the characters? Imamura says, yeah, I had the relationship between dogs and monkeys in mind when I came up with the idea of a conflict between a force of dogs and a force of monkeys. And here's the next footnote. Dogs and monkeys are traditionally depicted as having an adversarial relationship in Japan, similar to the imagined relationship between cats and dogs in English-speaking countries. Originally, Fox and the others were members of the Cornerian army, but Miyamoto said, let's make them outlaws, sort of like the Foreign Legion, and that's when they became a mercenary unit. So you notice they're not serving. They do what the general tells them to do in the stories, but they don't. They work for themselves. Were you thinking about the personality? So the interviewer says, were you thinking about the personality of each character as you designed them? Imamura says, when it came to the Super Famicom version, I didn't give them a ton of characterization, but I did come up with little touches like Slippy's help me, Ribbit. You know, some people were sad that Slippy didn't say Ribbit in Star Fox 64. Right, in the Super Nintendo version, Peppy's age was in line with the other characters, but for the N64 version, I decided he should be more of an uncle-type figure and aged him up. By the way, I read on the Star Fox 64 website that Planet Zones, with 2 S's, was Peppy's honeymoon spot. Now that's a gem right there. You guys really like those little details, huh? Imamura says, those of us who create our own characters, be they for Zelda or anything else, inevitably form an attachment to them. So we naturally ended up fleshing them out in that manner. In F-Zero X, you came up with detailed backstories for every driver, didn't you? Yeah, and I did almost all of it on my own. I had free reign to do what I wanted. I suspected that might be the case. It's all I'm good for. Is there any behind-the-scenes info you can share about Star Fox's characters? The antagonist Andros was modeled after redacted Buko, but I'm sure you'd think otherwise. Let me see. This is footnote number 3. Andros has long been rumored to be a caricature of then Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi. But Imamura's comment here suggests someone with a slightly lesser rank in the corporate hierarchy. My best guess is the then manager of Nintendo IRD, Hiroshi Ikeda. Okay. Everybody laughs. So this is all in-jokes, but the in-jokes lead to what we see created in the final cut. I also heard that General Pepper was derived from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That's right. I always loved the Beatles, and whenever I think of military uniforms, I immediately think of Sgt. Pepper. Miyamoto-san is also a big Beatles fan. Are there any other stories you could share concerning the names of the characters? Well, there's Andorf. And when Ganon showed up in A Link to the Past, he appeared as the desert thief Ganondorf. So that must have been rattling around in my mind, but I'd forgotten all about it when I came up with the name Andorf. So it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, they're quite alike. Ha ha ha. Imamura says, I was told that Andorf had to be changed for the West due to the name having Nazi Adolf overtones. And it says here, uncomfortable similarities to Adolf, one would presume. So his name became Andros for the overseas versions. And afterwards I thought to myself, I wish I unified that name from the beginning. The name Andorf is derived from Andromeda, right? That's right. As for Fox and Falco, well, I can't say I too hard about those names. The main programmer at the time came up with Peppy, and I was immediately like, that's good. But it wasn't until later that I realized that it's similar to Slippy. Falco, Peppy. So it's also similar to Pepper. Yeah, and now this game has added Tricky too. That's why we sometimes get characters' names wrong, much to our embarrassment. On the subject, I heard that the Tanuki character who appears in StarFox's training course is named Yaru Depon. So it is. I think that a lot of people, so like Tanuki being the raccoon, like Tanuki Mario in Super Mario Bros. 3. The interviewer says, I think that a lot of people might not have noticed that character. I myself didn't know about it until after the fact, when someone pointed out, there's a Tanuki character as well, and I was like, whoa. Imamura says, I came up with Yaru Depon right before I got married, so my own wife was the motif. For real? My wife has a Tanuki face, so I figured a real Tanuki would probably look very similar. I'm going to tell you a funny story with this. Tanuki Gao, Tanuki face, is a common describer of face type in Japan, used in reference to someone with softer, rounder facial features. The legend is that when they came up with Boo from the Mario games, one of the programmers, his wife would give him an ugly face. So as soon as he looked at his wife, she would look away, and that's the origin of the Boo's ability to look away when Mario looks at Boo. That's the story. So everybody laughs about his wife. Imamura says, that was around the time I first met you, Sao. The interviewer, Nintendo Dream Editor-in-Chief, Akinori Sao. Yeah, in Atlanta, that was E3 in Atlanta. At that time, our wedding was scheduled for around a month after that E3. Congratulations. So he's been married 20 years. Great. Hopefully he's still happy married. Imamura says, afterwards you gave us a great write-up in 64 Dream, and I was really pleased. I remember it well. I'm sorry to say I completely forgot all about that. That was in 1997, I think. So here's the Yaru Depon. You can barely see him. But if you know 64, he's always there in that intro. 64 and for the 3DS as well. And so, yeah, it's the tutorial section. I don't know if he's in 0. I don't remember if he was in 0. The never-ending experiment that was Star Fox 64. I understand the Nintendo 64 version of the Star Fox was conceived as a complete version, quote-unquote, of the Super Famicom game. Imamura says, let me offer a little background. When we transitioned to the N64, that large-scale shift from 2D into the world of 3D had everyone asking, now that everything's gone 3D, what do we do? And so all the programmers and designers were fervently getting up to speed with 3D development. 3D is the norm now, but back then it was a real struggle. Yes, I remember. I played these games. It was a big cock and deal to have a 3D game. Coming up with software can't have been easy. At that time, I was working with the programmer Kazuki Morita, whom I'd worked with since A Link to the Past, and the two of us began experimenting on our own. He was new to 3D programming, so creating something brand new right off the bat would have been tough. On top of that, we didn't have the final N64 hardware itself. We were working on a large dev computer, and the controller was also a prototype. So, irrespective of whether our experiment would or would not go anywhere, the two of us plugged away at this project for around 6 months. Eventually, we became attached to it and really wanted to realize it as a commercial product. But at the early stage, we weren't able to get anyone higher up to give the go-ahead. On the contrary, the vibe at the time was more, when are you going to let this go? And however, along came Space World, where we were exhibited at the N64 for the very first time. So it was rough. So push and shove, you were able to get that game out. So that was Space World 1995. He held before the release of the N64. This was the last time the Virtual Boy was even looked at. First and last time. Right, we were able to display a promotional video there, maybe 10 seconds of footage. That was our first time showing the project to the public. But even so, I don't recall ever being formally told our project had been greenlit. So we just kept plugging away at it superstitiously and eventually found ourselves in full production. So you didn't begin development with the intention of making a StarFox game. Correct. The project began with a very long period of experimentation, and when the director Takao Shimizu came on board, it started production in earnest. With regards to those early experiments, were they rooted in a port of the Super Famicom version? Imamura says, rather than porting the SFC game per se, it's more that the FSC game had already established a simple 3D system. You could scroll in one direction with genuine 3D depth and control the fighter as buildings and other objects move towards you. And it was easy to grasp from a programming perspective. So our preparatory experiments used it as a foundation. From that point, we started to make more and more headway. And then more people came aboard and it became a real game. The N64 game's full of cool cinematic production. For the time, sure, but when I look at it now, it feels distinctive. Morita was very skilled and was able to come up with really smooth fighter controls without me looking over his shoulder. And before I knew it, he expanded the simple corridor stages into awesome 360-degree terrain. The all-range mode. Imamura says, Shimizu joined at that point. From there, I'm able to focus exclusively on the parts I was most interested in, so I went to work fleshing out the characters in the story. As a result, characters like Yaru Depon came into being. Moving on from the N64 game to the GameCube game, why did you decide to establish an 8-year time skip? StarFox Adventures originated here in Kyoto. Personally, I've been working on the series for a long time, and I'm quite attached to it. So I went to Miyamoto like, let me do it. And he replied with, for this game, why not try an adventure-style game instead of a shooting game? And so Morita and I began toying around with various ideas. So this is when Rareware's last entry and getting a hold of Dinosaur Planet and changing everything. It was a bunch of gears in motion here. And so they were on the last part of the receiving end of this. So what kind of game were you attempting to make exactly? Something where StarFox runs around on foot, taking out enemies with his gun. But shooting games with a character displayed with that behind-the-back perspective can be tough to play. Gameplay. You can't always see the enemies because the player's character is blocking your view, right in the middle of the screen. So I was aware of these issues, but I really wanted to realize StarFox fighting with a gun. So I continued pondering directions for the game to take. In the N64 game, there are those stages like with the Landmaster, the tank, where the camera automates itself and enemies pour in from the sky, right? Right. I really love these sections. It feels great to take down all those enemies from below, so I was trying to build on that sensation and create something where you get to mow down tons of enemies. So how did you decide upon the 8-year time skip? I was thinking of a justification for why those four characters might reunite to fight the enemy, and I figured after 8 years, a few things had to have changed. I see. Imamura says, after all that time, Peppy might be too old to still be piloting a fighter. Obvious stuff like that. The game system's different, and the relationship between the characters has also evolved. So 8 years seemed like a nice, neat window of time. When the N64 version was released, you said if you ever made a sequel, I'd like it to set it 20 years in the future. I remember. Fox would be 38 years old right at his prime. Yeah. So you decided to take your StarFox Adventures concepts and merge them into a game Rare was working on, Dinosaur Planet. That's right. Dinosaur Planet was also being made for the N64 in the beginning, but it was fairly late in the N64's life product cycle, and people were already talking about Dolphin. In case you didn't know, for those of you who are young, the code name for what would become the Nintendo GameCube. And as we were asking ourselves whether to go ahead with our project internally, and staff were already being pulled away to work on other projects like Mario and Zelda, and so after work wrapped up on Majora's Mask, the project was restructured. What went down? After Majora was done, Miyamoto, as producer, made the call to move both games to the GameCube and suggested that we take the best elements from each project and combine them into a single game. So they took Rareware, they took Imamura stuff, and that's it. So this is a Digital Foundry side-by-side comparison of StarFox with Dinosaur Planet. I'm not sure if I'm going to put the link, but if I am able to, I'll do that. So what it is that this build shows with the game in a transitional state with the original polygon protagonist Saber's character. That was Saber before Fox. His Saber's model and certain voice sections replaced with those of Fox McCloud, but still contains many differences and deviations from what would have been in Star Fox Adventures, most notably the design and prominent use of secondary protagonist Crystal. Was that a smooth transition? I'm going to drink some water in 3 minutes here. At first, I was thinking to myself, what? Honestly, I would have been doing something as straightforward as communicating with, say, the Tokyo branch. But Rare is located in the countryside of England, so I really wondered how to proceed. At first, we were exchanging sketches via email, but we couldn't quite land on the same page when it came to the game's image, and quite getting them to see eye to eye in the matter required a ton of effort. You have had very different perceptions of the Star Fox world, it sounds. That's right, so that kind of back and forth went on around the clock. What sort of things did you find yourself talking about specifically? Initially, we had to address Fox's design, but we also spent a lot of time discussing the kinds of equipment he should have. Ah, I can imagine. I wanted Fox to use a gun, Imamura says, but the basic framework established with Dinosaur Planet was very Zelda-esque. So we ditched the gun and embarked on a long period of trial and error to determine what the best weapon might be. After experimenting along the lines of maybe a whip would work, how about a gun and a sword, etc., we finally settled on Crystal Staff, which is a weapon that doesn't require you to slash the enemy. After all, Fox is an animal character too, so I'm not sure if it'd be all right with him to be lobbing off heads or anything. Well, he's an animal. They're all animals. True, which elements of game were you involved with? Imamura says, it's hard to narrow it down. I wasn't the only member of Nintendo who worked on the game, but I was involved with everything from the music to the graphics to the story, to the extent of sitting down with the staff in their dev room in England, mouse in hand, and saying, it ought to be a little more like this, as I manually corrected and touched up the images right on the spot. Tweaking the code was beyond me, though. So you naturally faced a lot of hurdles then. On the projects I worked on before, my superiors would tell me, get it done, and all I had to do was say, sorry, right on it, and get to work. This time, however, I was also working out as a producer, so even though Rare's director was giving it his all, and I was working elbow to elbow with the staff on site, the game's volume was massive, and I also had to play the producer's role, kicking them in the ass and being like, okay, wrap this up already. Even so, it had taught me a lot. Until this project, I only ever worked on internally within Nintendo. So getting to work with an external team for the first time was a great learning experience. At first, the designer part of me was so immersed in the project that I seriously considered moving to England to live. I heard you went on to England for over 2 months at the end of last year. Yeah, that was during the final development push. Before that, I went over there for a 2-week stint. Okay, I'm going to take a little break. You can fast forward if you are watching this pre-programmed. If you're live, just give me a minute. And with me, I will get some water because this does take a lot out of me. This is a long interview, but I wanted to do this for the 30th anniversary. Getting hoarse. Hold on. All right. Okie dokie. These people with their car horns, because they're more important than me, right? Because reasons. Okay. So the interviewer asks, what was life like in England? Rare is located in a very rural area, only accessible by car. A lot of Western-style driving games feature tracks with very gentle rolling hills and roads that seems to stretch on forever. And that's exactly what it's like over there. So it was fun for us to rent a car and drive across the countryside. There really weren't many mountains over there. It's hilly terrain rather than steep inclines. Wistfully says, I'm getting homesick. On the last trip, I went over with Masashi Goto, who handled localization and dialogue, and he could speak and communicate in English, but he was the only person I could talk to. Everyone laughs. You have to get translators. Imamura says, that's why I racked up a ton of international phone calls on Rare's phones. The hotel we stayed at was a refurbished old mansion, and when you stepped outside, there was this beautiful old church towering into the sky before you. Working so long in such an exotic location must have been very inspirational as a creator. At the time, I was more of a producer than a creator. I spent most of my time talking with the director about how to squeeze more fun out of the game. So, you don't have a lot of fun stories then. I mean, I enjoyed myself. Rare staff were all friendly, and I had a good time over there. That only made it harder to have to crack the whip and push them to get their work done on time. I think a lot of readers who'd like to hear more about the relationship between Nintendo and Rare. I just went to Rare to work as a developer. I'm not in a position to comment about the corporate relationship, but we certainly gelled really well on site. What does Imamura-san think of Nakuake's comic? Okay. By the way, when you compare the N64 version to the GameCube version, you can see that the R-Wing, for example, has evolved over the course of 8 years. Imamura says, to be completely frank, it's not a case of evolution so much as beyond maintaining the basic shape of the R-Wing, leaving everything else up to the wants of the designer. I don't want to be inflexible or insisting the nozzle has to be X long or so on, nor do I like hearing those kinds of instructions as a designer. So my approach is more like anything within this ballpark is okay. So there's the R-Wing. This is a beautiful R-Wing. It's blurry, but you could tell this is the one from StarFox Adventures. Really great shapes. A render of Rare's R-Wing. So I see the GameCube's R-Wing as a very angular design. You're right. Well, that's something Adventures R-Wing designer was really into. To be honest, the first version of the R-Wing was so radically different than I had to have them change it. What was the first design like? Imamura says, well, no designer is going to hit their mark immediately, right? So in that respect, I was amazed that Nakaue was able to get the comic version's R-Wing up to standard, and in such a short space of time at that. To Nakaue, did you have to draw a lot of rough sketches? Nakaue says empathically, I drew so many sketches. Thanks for your hard work. So there are instances where you're still not satisfied, even when presented with drawing after drawing. Imamura says, there's a certain standard I want to meet, and my heart will say to me, this isn't good enough. I don't always know what I'm looking for, but I'll know it when I see it. So it can be difficult to explain exactly what I want. Nakaue says, it's instinctual, isn't it? Imamura says, yeah, and I was very fussy on my own ideas. But what's great about working with Nakaue is I could send him a rough design, and because he was so familiar with StarFox, I wouldn't have to explain every little detail. He was able to add meat to the bone, so to speak, and turn my ideas into something really interesting. These tatami panel sketches resembles the storyboards that Imamura-san drew us at the first planning meeting for the comic. I drew something, I typically draw storyboards like those with making a game. I did something very similar to the opening and ending of StarFox Adventure. Do you draw storyboards like this for cinematics? For those, the storyboards tend to be more detailed. One thing that really impressed me about the production of this comic was just how many times Nakaue played the N64 version in order to cross-reference certain things. Nakaue says, for instance, the color of the R-Wing's jet changes depending on whether it's in space or in the atmosphere. Oh, it's little details like that. I have to pay attention to that next time I play this, if I can get past a certain section here. I remember telling him there's nobody else in the world playing Star Fox 64 as much as you right now. Nakaue says, I had to check to see what was going on with the back of Pepe's head. On that subject, I hear Benimaru Ito has a clay model of Fox in his office. Benimaru Ashura Ito, a freelance artist who's collaborated with Nintendo on numerous occasions, including direct participation in the development of games in the Kirby and Mother series and the shelved Star Fox 2, which is now on the SNES Classic if you want to own that, as well as official comic manga adaptations of Star Fox, Super Metroid, and Mother 2. I like those comics. Those are good. Yes. Years ago, when Ashura-san was drawing the Star Fox comic for Nintendo Power, He found it difficult to draw those animals' faces from various angles, so he made those models for reference. And there, oh, let's see if we can get a close up. This is the self-made StarFox model. Let's take a look. Can we look at that up close? Yeah, you can barely see. These are like clay models of all the. There's in the center you see Peppy. To Peppy's right you see Falco, and then you see Fox to his left. There's different shapes. Let's see if we can get this a little more centered. Okay. When Imamura said, so Nakoe continues. When Imamura-san told me that story, I thought, that's a smart way to do it. I made some for myself too. Yeah, but when we relocated our editorial office, Nakaue threw them all away. Nakaue says, well, I feel like I successfully graduated from Peppy University, so I told you to give them to me when you were done. I'll make some more. Oh, the interviewer didn't get those heads, did he? Oh, well. Like Godzilla, Fox might change from work to work. Okay, this is the next section. So Nakaue drew the comic in order to bridge the 8-year game between Star Fox 64 and Adventures, but Imamura-san had you already envisaged many of the events that took place during that 8-year period. The two of us worked hard on the contents of the comic, and I think we came up with an interesting story, but I'm going to have to spoil it a little bit. In the N64 game, Andross, the personification of evil, is defeated, and the comic focuses on the resurrection. I wanted to establish a relationship similar to that of Mario and Bowser, but in the case of Mario and company, there's not much pretense, whereas in Nakaue's comic, there's a corrupted general who worships Andross and seeks to revive him, and in Star Fox Adventures, well, it's definitely a spoiler. Anyhow, the idea was to try and anchor that concept in the comic as well. Even though he looks to have been defeated, he's fated to rise again. In the future, as Star Fox continues as a series, I think users will be able to have fun wondering, how will he return to this time? Well, what'll he look like? I have a certain degree of pity for Andross as a character. Nakaue says, oh, so you're on Team Andross, is that it? Imamura says, I wouldn't go that far, but I do have a fondness for him in this time. So one of my goals was to create a greater awareness of Andross among the customers. Is there anything you wish you could have covered in more detail in the comic? I feel like the page count was a little low due to the fact that the comic was being given away for free. Personally, I would have liked to have had a few more pages. Nakaue says, as the two of us talked, the story continued to get bigger and bigger. Imamura says, it could have gone anywhere. Nakaue says, initial premise was completely different. From Nintendo Dream's perspective, I thought it was a shame that Nintendo wrapped it up after only 4 episodes after 2 months. But if we continued any longer, Nakaue's body might have given out. Would it have been just as hard to maintain that pace even in black and white? No, if it had been black and white, bitter smile, I guess. Yeah, I know exactly how Nakaue-san feels. I do wonder if the comics we distributed to the stores actually made it to the people who wanted to read them. My wife wanted to play Star Fox Adventures, actually, so I went to the store to buy it, but when I asked for the comic, they didn't have any. I checked out another local store on launch day and met 3 people who bought the game, which made me really happy, but the comic hadn't been given to any of them. PR rep. Oh, here we go. Now we get to the PR rep here. I didn't think there'd be much promotional value in using the comic as a pre-order bonus, so I wanted it to be freely available in stores so that those who found it interesting would go on to buy the game, but getting every store to understand that is easier said than done. Imamura, that said, it's also on Nintendo's website, so I think a lot of people have been able to read it. You might be able to find it on in Google search, maybe, or Amazon search, whatever. Bing. It's good that it's on the website where it can remain accessible for a long time. Imamura, right now, in the early process of redesigning Fox for a new project, and I don't know how Nakaue-san might feel about this, but I'm trying to reflect on the better elements of this comic as I work on the new design. Nakaue's like, oh, really? Imamura's like, I don't want to be too stuffy about my perception of Fox. For example, a character like Godzilla might have a different face depending on the adaptation. And I think it's fun for people to be able to say, I prefer such and such Godzilla. To be totally real with you, there are elements of Nakaue-san's comic, and they're just a little off to me, and I really want to draw them myself. And as it turns out, I kind of can. Everyone laughs. Imamura says, I think it's fun that the project I'm working on now will feature the Nakaue version of Fox, and there's currently exists a rare version and a Super Smash Bros. Melee version. There's a lot of back and forth among the fans about which version they prefer. I like the Melee version, for example, so I get to make a newer and even cooler version of Fox for the next game, rather than simply reusing this model Rare made. Right now, I'm immersed in Nakao's comics and trying to figure out how to incorporate their essence. Me personally, I like the Adventures one. I like that StarFox can just run around, because running around with a leather jacket's kind of, running around with the vest is cool, but that's my preference. I can't wait to see it. So, oh, here's the comic. So, I can't read this. Ano something. Rai Lilat. Okay, so it says Lilat system. Uh, so this is some of the comic. The first page of Star Fox Adventures prequel comic subtitled "Farewell, Beloved Falco." You can find the full comic on Nintendo Japan's website and a fan translation on the R-Wingpedia. Um, I don't know if that's actually in there. Let me see if I see it in here. We'll go back to it in a minute. Gallery. Okay, so I think it's still in here. Okay, so you can see the whole comic book in here. I just wanted to show you that for a moment. There's all kinds of these are nice like little fan translations here. Okay, let's see if we can get back to okay. This next chapter is Star Fox Adventures voice actors are rare staff. Huh? So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the lack of Japanese dub. There's a good reason behind that decision. I wanted to dub the game in Japanese, but the game's voice acting was actually performed by the staff at Rare. So it's all very efficient and it means they don't have to travel to London to find voice actors. Oh, I had no idea. It doesn't sound the least bit unnatural to me. Yeah, they did a great job. Back in the day, a lot of Nintendo's games used voices provided by the staff. We dubbed Star Fox 64 ourselves at first, too. Oh, really? We were all like, okay, now this is going to be so cool. But then we showed it to people outside the team. They responded with lame. They're like, StarFoxu, can anyone help? We were told this is unforgivably bad, and so we switched to professional voice actors. But now I want to hear for myself. And Nakaoi says, yeah, I want to play that version. Imamura says, Rare did the same thing with their game, except they were really good at it. Can you imagine Imamura be like, Peppy, I will help you, Peppy. It sounds completely natural to us, but now have foreign players been reacting to the dub? Imamura says, we had Nintendo of America's people listen to it and said they said it was perfectly okay. The culture around voice acting isn't cemented in the US to the extent that it is in Japan. In the US, voice acting is performed by regular actors, whereas in Japan, voice actors have a very specific and distinctive style of delivery. And it could be that it's such an impression on us that we're not as capable of tolerating such amateurish voice acting. Aha. You might be onto something. The reason we included voice acting in Star Fox 64 was because we wanted the players to be able to comprehend the messages being given to them while they were in the thick of shooting and dodging. The Super Famicom's versions messages were purely text-based. So as a reflection of the feedback from players telling us they didn't have time to read any of the messages, we moved to incorporate voice clips and kanji and so on. So we also experimented with the audio. So kanji is basically cutting corner. When you're writing, for those of you who take classes, hiragana take a lot of space, and that's why it's fun to write tweets in Japanese, because you can cut a lot of corners. Now, there's more than 150 characters on tweets, but when you write in kanji, you can write a whole fucking essay. Anyway, clips, kanji, so on. We also experimented with the audio programming to figure out just how many voices we could add. You really did manage to cram a good amount of voice onto the N64 cartridge, huh? You're right, and I thought it succeeded at its purpose. From Star Fox Adventures, the player is almost never going to be in a situation where they're likely to miss a message or instruction. It's like General Pepper speaking, So I thought a dub wasn't necessary. However, I know that some fans were probably looking forward to the voice acting, so I understand why they may be a little disappointed. Yeah. Yeah, there's some, it's not as big because you'll mostly see Fox in that game, in Adventures. The voice acting did add a lot to the N64 version, so I get why some people might find Adventures lacking. Imamura says, that said, there are people in my generation who see a certain coolness in English voice lines. What's funny is that some of the sales people who didn't like our N64 dub told us that the Super Famicom, or what is it? Wait. What was the other one? something like that. So the voices, blah blah blah, voices were cooler, and so as a trial, we looked backwards and imported those SFC style blah blah blah. But the reaction was, nah, that sucks. We really did experiment with the animal language though. Laughs. So interesting enough, the SFC style speech is available as an option exclusive to the PAL version Lilat Wars. Okay. So even though in adventures when the dinosaurs first start speaking their native tongue, someone who doesn't understand English might wonder why aren't they subtitled? That's fair enough. In any event, we took a lot of flack over the dubbing issue, so we'll definitely take those opinions into account going forward. Looking forward to the Star Fox game being made with Namco, which is Star Fox Assault. Everyone laughs. By the by, which of Adventure's characters were you most attached to? That'd be Crystal. Crystal, I love Crystal too. It's that furry fetish. Crystal is a character that has been around since the early versions of Dinosaur Planet, and as that game was making the transition into a Star Fox game, they asked, so should we get rid of Crystal? But I thought it'd be a waste to scrap her, so when I visited Rare, I drew a ton of pictures. I think you made the right call. Imamura says, there's an American comic called Vampirella. I know, that came in the 70s and the 90s, that I'm really into. So that character is a female vampire who wears risque costumes. And so I drew some quick sketches of Crystal with that kind of image and had a lot of discussions with Rare. And so this version of Crystal turned out to be much sexier than the Dinosaur Planet version. I have to look at the models again for research purposes. I see. Imamura says, Miyamoto and I were both aiming to add a little sex appeal, I guess. I think Miyamoto always wanted to add that flavor. Really? Imamura says, I think somewhere in his mind, Miyamoto always pictured Star Fox as somewhat mature, but he's been saying things like, wouldn't it be great to add a slightly sexy character since the beginning? Likewise for 64, although this game certainly appeals to children somewhat. I think Miyamoto felt that learning fully into what would be going too far, and and he wanted to add some more mature touches where possible. Cat Monroe from the N64 game did have a flirtatious, cutting personality, but there had been a slight mismatch between her personality and her appearance. I know Ima Kuni from the Vineverse, who does, she has VTuber and Twitch. She loves Cat more than Crystal, but I'm a Crystal simp, so sorry. Imamura says, in that respect, I thought Crystal was a better match. Agreed. Of all the female characters that have appeared in Rare's games thus far, this was the first one I really liked. Right. I think I was able to come up with a design that Japanese people could latch onto. I don't know whether she'll continue to appear in future games, but since she was positioned as the heroine of Star Fox, she did appear in Star Fox Command for the DS, by the way. She was positioned as the heroine of Star Fox Adventures. It was important to design her so that she wouldn't look out of place next to the established Star Fox cast. So I don't know if you can see that clearly. So there's before and after. It's all blurry, but here's the caption. It says, a side-by-side comparison of Dinosaur Planet, wallpaper illustrations featuring Crystal versus a promotional render of the final design. It's pretty good. So you've been working with Miyamoto-san ever since you joined Nintendo. That's right. What kind of person is Miyamoto to you? He's my guitar teacher. To wrap this up, is there anything you'd like to say to the readers? I think the customers probably equate Star Fox with shooting games, and neither Star Fox nor F-Zero are games and genres that prominently focus on their characters, necessarily. That said, I really enjoyed diving deep into the characters and packed Star Fox 64 with enough character-centric drama for one to credibly describe it as a character game. So for Miyamoto and I, there was nothing particularly unnatural about the jump to adventure, but it may not have seemed like such a natural progression to the audience. I do think everyone was happy to be able to freely control Fox, says the interviewer. Imamura says, however, creating such a massive number of events and scenarios took a ton of work. I was also very aware of Zelda and consciously tried to find ways to take our game in different directions. Put simply, I wanted to make something packed with cool cutscenes that had a big budget and Hollywood vibe. And from the beginning, I wanted to make something the customers would be satisfied with. I think we hit every target. So should we expect the Star Fox game you're working with Namco to be similarly lavish? That's right. We've been meeting with Namco daily, and just like Sega, Namco's Star Fox team is super enthusiastic. Side note that they worked on F-Zero GX, AX for the arcade, and StarFox Assaults, which is kind of. I wish they could have made StarFox Warriors, Koei Tecmo like Hyrule Warriors. That would have been great. Um, so Namco's Fox team is super enthusiastic. I can really feel the excitement of the of Namco producer Atsushi Shiozawa and his staff. So I'm sure the next game will be just as extravagant. It was. I like the combination of run and gun, flying around the R wing, the Landmaster, on rails. It had everything, and it was very good. You could go back and forth between tank and R wing and running around. What they made for Assault was very good. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it in a different sense than to the new. I'm looking forward to it in a different sense to the new adventure game. Yeah, as am I. So how about that F-Zero game you're making with Sega? That's F-Zero GX, AX, F-Zero, huh? My lips are sealed. Please ask Sega producer Toshihiro Nagoshi-san. You just finished working with Rare, and now you're working with Sega and Namco. I don't think there's another creator in the world who's had that experience. That's something I'm proud of, Imamura says, and I've been glad to have had so many great experiences. All three of the companies you mentioned have had their differences, but the basic spirit of the developers is the same, and when I'm working with any one of them, I do feel like another laborer at the construction yard. The procedures and methods do differ from company to company, though. I feel so fortunate. I get to work on F-Zero and StarFox at the same time, and isn't that awesome? I really do think to myself, I'm so blessed. And that, so here's Q&A. So this is the Q&A section. What does Nintendo mean to Imamura-san? The answer is, a deep-rooted company in Kyoto, we make games using traditional techniques. I feel like among craftsmen, recently to collaborate with more external companies. I like to develop new and cutting-edge games. I'm going to kind of fast forward to this. If you were to be reincarnated as something else, what would you like to become? An alien, I think. I'd be born into a world unlike anything I've ever seen. Here's my one compliment. What's the most delicious food you've eaten recently? Home cooked meal. What were you like as a young child? I was no gang leader or anything like that, Imamura says, but my neighborhood friends and I would run into mountains and fields from morning till night. We would run around the mountains. I didn't like studying, but even though I hated it, I held myself to a standard of making sure I never got a zero score. When I played indoors, I did nothing but draw, primarily monsters and such. And as I recall, my father was a painter, so I guess I was naturally influenced by him. So here's Imamura. I don't know if I can show you that. There he is there. Signing away. Signing some StarFox shirt for a Namco giveaway. What was Imamura's childhood dream? To be someone with a career in drawing, with my childish mind synonymous with a mangaka. I realized that I'm going to make my living drawing pictures. Okay. What was the best part of joining Nintendo? I've been a massive Beatles fan, and okay. I'll read this last part. I've been a massive Beatles fan ever since junior high, and the year I joined Nintendo, Miyamoto and Takashi Tekuza were invited to meet Paul McCartney before their meeting. Tekuza asked to borrow some of my records, so I brought him my Paul McCartney record. Afterwards, Tekuza told me thanks and returned the record, and to my huge surprise, Paul's signature was on the cover. I nearly fell flat on the floor. Seriously, I'm so glad I joined Nintendo. So Imamura Sensei, he joined his neighborhood friends and went exploring in the mountains and the fields from morning till night, and didn't like studying, just wanted to play hooky. But even though I held myself to a standard, making sure I never got a zero score. So he did studying anyway, and he drew, and then he got a Paul McCartney signed record when joining Nintendo. So that is the end of the whole interview. This was something to me. Looking at this guy, there are a lot of freelance artists, and they come up with ideas and concepts. And I don't know if I don't think I would have ever had a chance. Maybe I would your stuff, But my art from DeviantArt's been out there. My art on YouTube has been out there. My art on Twitter, my art on TikTok and Instagram. So people want to see me, they can see me, okay? No problem with that. If they want to hire me, we'll talk about it, okay? because I don't want to be like, I don't want my creativity to ever be fucked. But I'm happy that he's moved on after working with the other StarFox games and maybe StarFox. I think he probably worked on StarFox Zero, maybe. But he did everything he was supposed to. So what's going to happen tomorrow is, from this point forward, I'm going to do, offline posts. Now, what you see here is StarFox. So you can kind of hear something rattling around. That can't be good. What I'm going to try to do, I may fail in this attempt, is I'm going to try to get StarFox to work. Maybe I'm going to try to test it out tonight, probably. And then tomorrow night, for sure, I'm going to play some StarFox and record it and then post it up online tomorrow. And if I'm not able to do that, then the first game in the series of StarFox games to show you will be this one. And this one does work. For those of you who were on my TikTok live stream, you saw a little bit of my gameplay. I was very happy to get this working. This is the actual McCoy. This is the real StarFox cartridge, okay? So you'll be seeing this activated. You'll see this going. Let me see if I can show you better. But for sure, this one's going to work. This one is a fucking mystery. I will not be able to show you StarFox 2, but whatever. These things happen. This was something to me. I hope it was something to you. As General Pepper would say, good luck.